it's an interesting moment to work with startups right now because it's really relatively easy to just jump into a prototype, building a prototype and creating something. But at the same time, the competition is so high across so many levels. And there is a lot of uncertainty, of course, in the market, considering all the changes and so forth. So I feel there's on one side like a lot of speed and at the same time a lot of need for like guidance and understanding and context and strategy.
Sound of Startups podcast is hosted by Taj, produced by Amplitude Ventures, your partner in early stage startups.
Hello, everyone. We are back with the new episode after a long time. And today in studio, I have a guest with me. His name is Chiara. She's based in Italy. And she has worked in almost anything and everything that is related to creative industries in a good way. And she had her stint at small companies, big companies, and then back to small companies. She's a true legend in that domain. Majorly started her career with the music marketing and then eventually moved to YouTube. And now she works with in the domain of AI and the domain of publishing and in different aspects of related to music and creative industries. So ladies and gentlemen, with that, allow me to welcome Chiara. Hi Chiara, welcome to the Sound of Startup podcast.
Thank you so much, Taj, for having me.
Let's start it. How did it started? Everything.
A long part of my career has been with YouTube. Of course, when I was studying, when I was young, YouTube didn't even exist, so it wasn't really in my plans for obvious reasons. And it all started, I think because I've always been really passionate and fond about music, creativity, arts, books, as well, as you can probably tell from my background as well. And I always wanted to be in the creative space, to work in the creative space. So that was my dream when I was a kid. But what I love the most is actually to make things happen. So I was wondering how I can help music and arts and culture to actually get out there, to become a relevant project, meaningful project, and memorable things also for new audiences. So I decided to take a degree in economics and business and management, focused on creative industries. And so fast forward, what happened a few years later was that I was looking for a job, and then a friend of mine said, "Look, I'm familiar with this newly founded startup. They are working on something that is like completely new about digital music distribution." And so I got in touch. I got the job. I was the very first employee in this startup. It was only the 3 founders and myself. And I have to say that was so interesting, Taj, because it was 2006, and it was, the entire industry was on the very brink of something that would change forever. And so a few years later, I applied for a job at YouTube that was just about to launch their partnership program in Italy, and they were starting to grow their team, and that's how I got there. I started with startups, and it's something that I think helps a lot everyone in their experiences, because you see a lot of things as well.
And you were there for quite a long time, I actually see. Well, it was a digital distribution company?
Yeah, it was one of the very first, and basically we were in between independent label and independent artists, and the very first DSPs at the time, which were mainly mobile companies back in the days. That was a huge thing back in the days. And then iTunes launched, and obviously that was a big change.
Oh, quite interesting. That's nice. So, from economics to digital distribution, and then you ended up starting your career. How young you were at that time?
When I finished uni, I was 24. So I was in my mid 20s when I started to work in music.
That's quite interesting. So so you joined to YouTube around 2006, 2007? How did YouTube happen? And what was the journey like? What did you do there at over the period? You were there for quite long.
Yeah, for about 13 years, indeed. My initial role was for Italy and was focused on onboarding partners on the music side, but also once again on sports. So I happened to work with the football clubs and also with like national leagues back in those days. And then a few years later, I moved 100% to the music team. I started to work on like Southern Europe, so I started to cover Spain as well and other markets. And later on, I took more regional role. So I was overlooking EMEA, particularly from a partner relation perspective with the majors. In my last role, I was working with the majors on one side, and I had a team overlooking from Nordics countries to Sub-Saharan Africa.
So what does a typical YouTube partnership that time used to look like compared to what it is today?
Yeah, so, back in those days, obviously YouTube was a completely new platform. Every time you were talking to someone, either a broadcaster or a record labels, etc., they didn't know what YouTube was, of course. And so there was a lot of education about the platform, but as well a lot of support to provide in terms of also using really sophisticated tools, especially Content ID. But after that part, obviously it was more a matter of like helping the partners to actually, take the most benefit out of the platform in terms of promoting their catalog, promoting their artists, doing cool things. I also was involved directly in the launch of YouTube Premium that happened across a number of markets. So it's really like a way to educate on one side and help people understand, and also a lot of like experimenting on new things and a lot of product feedback as well. That is absolutely crucial for a platform to get from partners.
Okay, let's start from the basic one, because what you gave is a very beautiful bio of YouTube. But what I want to understand is, what do you mean by partnership?
They provide to you like an infrastructure so that you can claim content from a copyright standpoint, and you are allowed to monetize that content because from a rights perspective, you have commercial rights to do that. There are some millions of partners on YouTube on the platform these days, and the amount of revenues generated is really significant. I believe the latest figure, for instance, for the music industry, that the company communicated a few months ago is $8 billion as a payout to the music industry in basically like the last year. This is coming from monetizing from an ad-supported based model perspective, but also from subscription. And the other thing that is pretty unique to YouTube is that also UGC content can be monetized. If you are record labels, you are basically able to get revenues from videos that are being uploaded by users and that are using portions of your own catalog. So you are able via Content ID to claim that content and to monetize it, which is really like a win-win as well for users and the ecosystem in general.
Yeah, interesting. How's sports? How does things work in sports? This is something very new. I don't know. Like, help me understand this.
Yeah, so at the very beginning of my career, I worked with some sports partners. You might know some of them, Taj. If I say Juventus or AC Milan or Inter Milan, you might have heard of them, right?
You're trying to be too humble. They are everything in the sport. And you say FC Milan, nobody who doesn't know it. So how does that work? What used to be like the terms with them, like the high level? How does the partnership in the sports in YouTube work?
depends on the kind of partners, but generally speaking, like for instance, football clubs or sports club in general, they have a significant presence on YouTube. For instance, they upload videos about trainings or about like meeting with their fans or like their own anthem or stories about their football players and so forth. And so they create a presence on YouTube, which they can obviously, monetize and grow. And that, while of course you have also institutions like sports federations and others that might have, even rights on highlights that they can upload.
You had a major working relations with the labels also, extended labels for a long time. How was working with the label? What was your biggest learnings working with label?
My biggest learning was really about my professional biggest learning was really about scale. If you are a label, you have a lot of also like local branches, and you need to deal with a lot of complexity as well internally. And so the way you manage this, it's actually really critical, because you need to manage information. You need to ensure that that information is consistent and goes across everyone and so forth. My own role was really new, so no one had that role before me in the organization. And so I really started by looking at how measures were working internally and trying to motivate something that they were doing. But another thing that was indeed a big learning was around the aspect of cultural relevance. So to me, the opportunity to sit in meetings with the labels across so many different countries, and just the opportunity to listen to the content they were working on, watching the music videos they were working on. That's so interesting, because you really understand that sometimes you see things from the outside being like just the industry, when in reality is there's so much about content and passion and actually culture.
Interesting. So, okay. I'll ask a very specific question. You started in a startup called YouTube, and after so long working there, and then you left when it became a global enterprise. How was the journey from starting from startup to something as mammoth as YouTube? How was the platform's journey?
Yeah, so no, it was that moment when I left the startup and I joined YouTube. I basically went from a place where, as again, I was the only employee with 3 founders in their early 30s to a huge company, Google and YouTube, with obviously a lot of processes, a lot of teams, a lot of internal complexity, and so there was a lot of adaptability that I need to learn and to take. But I have to say that something that I tried to keep consistently in my journey, in my career, is that I love keeping that entrepreneurial spirit. So regardless if you are in a startup or in a big company, I think there's always room for yourself to create something that is unique to you.
What I want to understand is, how did YouTube evolve? If you were to say this is YouTube, this is how I see YouTube as a company in the 13-15 years that I saw. You were somebody who's internal, and its rise was massive. How do you see that journey?
Yeah, I mean, it's been an incredible growth, really, honestly, because they really started to from having a few partners and being a startup to become this huge platform that is a household name for so many. There were a number of changes over the years. Obviously, the partnerships team played a big part in that. Another big milestone definitely was from a business model perspective, when they launched as well YouTube Premium, and that provided diversification of revenues, but also they started to create a number of new products and new features.
So my question is that you work with a lot of startups. with somebody who has seen her. What are the things that you think are going right in the startup industry right now?
Yeah, it's an interesting moment to work with startups right now, because something that I'm noticing a lot is that, of course, compared to the past, you see really like a speed of execution. It's really relatively easy to just jump into a prototype, building a prototype, and creating something. But at the same time, the competition is so high across so many levels, and there's a lot of uncertainty, of course, in the market, considering all the changes and so forth. So I feel there's on one side like a lot of speed, and at the same time a lot of need for like guidance and understanding and context and strategy, which is one of my favorite words, as you might notice.
Yeah, I like it. So I'll put it this way. Two things I believe are very important for a startup. One is speed, and the second is direction. The speed is an ability to execute, to do a lot of quick iteration, and direction is whether whatever you are making will be relevant for, say, 3 months, 6 months down the line later, or is there a viable money that can be made? And then, are you solving the future problems, not now? Because whatever you are doing now will always be somehow be there to sort it. So what's your view on direction?
Yeah, direction is so critical, Taj. I really like your approach. I also believe that these two factors, speed and direction, are super important. When it comes to direction, a discussion I recently had with one of the startup was really about thinking a little bit long term. And for instance, an exercise that I suggested doing was really like taking some time for the team to be in the same room and think about OKRs, which was something that when I was at Google, at YouTube, I was doing on a consistent basis. So objectives and key results, which doesn't mean just looking at the metric, the first metric that comes to mind. It really means like thinking a little bit longer term, and having a vision, how you translate that vision into those 3, 4, 5 max, big rocks that are really like what you are aiming for, and how do you measure the success for these big rocks. So that's really something that I think it's critical. And doing an exercise like this, it's not something that I believe should be optional, because it brings a lot of clarity, and also it empowers the team to get also a lot of focus more. Because sometimes when you are in a startup, the feeling I have is that everyone feels like they should say yes to everything. And just to experiment, etc. But sometimes, of course, experimenting is indeed critical thing. Experiments are absolutely important, but you also need to have focus, because if you run too many things at the same time, you might lose focus, and that eventually becomes an issue. Also, you need to take care of your own team. You don't want your team to get burned out. That's also important. So having something that is that helps create that focus, it's super important. And by doing that, you can also create space and make room to have also like a little bit of extra help. Like maybe you need more help on like to understand the landscape, to understand the competition, to actually collect feedback in a more structured way. By doing that, you can also like ask for help and ask for additional direction, which can be very helpful.
Okay, the next two keywords are very important, what you said. One is saying no, and the second is focus.
Yes.
with technology, there is so many options and possibilities that the real crisis right now is that what not to do. So that's the biggest challenge for startup, because there are 500 directions to do things, and then people do it, and there's a whole new set of philosophy said, hey, you should do this, you should do that also. And then there is so much oversupply of directions also, that people do things, and then the biggest thing what is got is focus is lost. And the moment focus is lost, then you become practically a rat in a rat race. And then eventually one day you find that you realize you're tired and nothing is coming out of it. So this whole ability to keep on saying no and keep focusing on what to do, and most importantly what not to do, is the survival instinct that I say. But what has been your experience on that domain?
Yeah, this is a big challenge, I think, for a number of people. And myself, I've been struggling with this, especially at the beginning of my career, because I had the tendency to say pretty much yes to everything. And at one point, I realized that it wasn't really like the right approach. First of all, because I was really, really tired, to your point, but also because I came to realize that it wasn't really like a number of these things weren't really like necessarily moving the needle. And so I started really like to support my process in terms of decision making by structuring myself with the things like OKRs, and especially asking myself, okay, this is something that I could do, but what this is for? What's the impact of that? And so by questioning that, I really started to get more focus. But also something that I was doing, like something very practical that I was doing, and I still do. I write a lot. And it's something that you need to do some workout basically to be able to say no, but eventually it helps.
What is the biggest mistake that you think most of the startups that you see are doing these days?
Yeah, I think to your point, the lack of strategic vision is something that I happen to see quite some time. Sometimes I feel that people are so passionate about that idea. They love that idea so much that they cannot see anything else, and so they cannot see the blind spot of that, and so that can become problematic. And so it's really important to take a step back from the idea and actually, to your point, to get direction on the idea, like think a little bit long term and understand exactly your strategies. The other aspect is as well to not think enough about how a brilliant execution actually change things. So obviously with technology you can do a number of different things in relatively quickly, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's good execution. So good execution is across everything. And the third aspect I would say is yes, please think a little bit longer term. It's not just today or tomorrow. Think in a year time, in 3 years time, in 5 years time. Put together a slide with your OKRs and make sure that that is relevant and consistent, at least for 1 year. That's something really important.
If you were to restart today as a startup, again, what are things that you will be taking careful of?
First of all, I think would be to be curious. I think it's super important. Being curious, being an active listener, get and collect a lot of feedback in a structured way. Travel as much as you can. Learn new things, even unrelated from what you are doing, because they might inspire you in what you are creating. Meet up with a lot of people. And as much as possible, try to collect all that knowledge, all those feedback into something that is structured and can help you to create your own strategy. And last but not least, be passionate and have fun.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think this was a wonderful talk. We talked a lot on different things about startups and how things are actually happen in a big company and a small company and things that people need to learn. And with this, I would like to say thank you so much for your time, Chiara. It was so nice to have you.
Thank you for the lovely conversation, Taj.
And I hope to see you sometime soon. Take care, everyone. Next week, we'll be back with the new episode. Ciao.